Hi everyone, and welcome to the Cannabis Tax Resolution minicast. The topics we cover on this minicast are related to IRS and state tax audits, resolving state and IRS tax debt, and topics around unfiled tax returns. We will also discuss the latest in any tax news that will affect your business both positively and negatively, including a sprinkle of tax planning strategies that will save you money and keep you out of tax trouble. My name is Desiree Anderson, and this is a mini-cast that tackles a single topic in a bite-sized format. Each cast lasts no longer than 3 to 15 minutes. Today's topic is titled, How Long Must You Worry About Not Filing a Tax Return? Now, by law, all individuals who fit the requirements are required to file a federal and a state income tax return, with, of course, the exception of those states that do not impose an income tax on their residents, like Florida, Texas, Washington State, and about 6 other states. Now, the only individuals that are not required to file a return are those that don't meet the income requirements. Now, businesses such as corporations, multi-member LLCs that normally file partnership returns, and also regular partnerships, on the other hand, are required to file a return every single year, even if they made zero income, in which case they'll be required to file an income tax return showing zero income. Now, if you are one of those individuals or businesses that haven't filed a return in years, as in, let's say, 7 years or more, you will only be obligated to file a return for the last 6 years if the IRS ever catches up with you. In other words, the IRS usually doesn't pursue non-filers after 6 years from the filing due date. Now, there are certain circumstances where you'll want to file a return that is more than 6 years old because, let's say, a third party other than the IRS happens to be requesting that you do so, in which case you may have to go back more than 6 years when preparing unfiled tax returns. But if you're preparing tax returns that are strictly based on your filing requirements by the IRS, then you don't have to go back more than 6 years. In some cases, the IRS will prepare a return on your behalf. So keep in mind, if you haven't filed a timely tax return, the IRS does have the authority to file one on your behalf. Now, this will occur if their system shows, say, a W-2 from an employee or a 1099 showing income from other sources, in which case the IRS may calculate and assess the tax on your behalf. This is called an SFR, which means substitute for return. If the IRS prepares an SFR on your behalf, they do not take into consideration any deductions, exemptions, or credits that you are otherwise entitled to. So if this even happens, or rather, if this ever does happen, so if the IRS does decide to file an SFR on your behalf, you can replace that SFR that they filed on your behalf with an original tax return. Doing so may reduce your overall tax liability because you would include any credits, deductions, and exemptions that you are entitled to. Now, although the IRS will give you a pass for all tax returns that are over 6 years old, you mustn't forget your state. Some states follow the IRS and therefore won't come after you for returns that are more than 6 years old. But you also have states that don't follow the IRS rules. They either have their own time frame or no time frame at all. For example, in Georgia, where I live, there is no cutoff. So the state of Georgia will come after you for returns that were due 10 years ago or even more. They don't have a cutoff like the IRS does. Now, technically speaking, remember I'm saying technically speaking, it is a crime not to file a tax return if you owe taxes. But it isn't a crime to file a return and then realize that you can't pay the taxes that are due. Because you can make payments, you can make payment arrangements, or you may qualify for something that's called currently not collectible if you are currently unable to make those payments. And you might even qualify for something called an offer in compromise if it is obvious to the IRS that you will never be able to pay what you owe. So never be scared to file a tax return, no matter how late you're filing that return, because doing so is okay. You're not going to get arrested or thrown in jail for owing taxes. However, not filing a return is a different story. If you don't file a return, then the consequences can be, jail time. Now, it's normally punishable by 1 year in prison for each unfiled year. However, keep in mind, the United States justice system doesn't have enough jails or the desire to arrest people for not filing a tax return. So I would say, don't be scared you're going to get arrested, but you never know what could happen. Now, the IRS usually identifies non-filers through its Information Return Program, which is IRP for short. This system matches information documents like W-2 wage statements and 1099 income statements that they receive from payers such as bankers, clients of yours, employees, and they normally compare these statements like your W-2s and your 1099s against tax returns that should have been filed. Now, if the system fails to find a match, the IRS will then initiate a taxpayer delinquency investigation, or TDI for short. The purpose of the TDI is to find out why a taxpayer didn't file a tax return. Now, once this has been determined, there are 4 ways that the IRS typically notifies non-filers. And how they contact you usually indicates how serious they view your particular case. So you are either contacted by receiving a written request from the IRS over a 16-week period. Now, the letters start out usually non-threatening, but if you continuously ignore the notices, subsequent letters may be a little bit more threatening. A second way is you may receive a letter with a deadline. Now, these types of letters usually give you a 30-day deadline to file your return. Letters with a deadline will usually request that you file the return directly with the officer that contacted you. Another way the IRS will contact you if you haven't filed a return is by a visit. Basically, an IRS officer or agent will come visit you. So starting in 2020, IRS revenue officers began visiting the homes of high-income non-filers to inform them of their tax filing and payment obligations. So don't be surprised if you get a knock on the door and it's an IRS agent. Now, higher earners in this context are people that make over $100,000. So if you ever do get a visit because you're considered a higher earner, that would mean that you're probably making $100,000 or more. Now, if an IRS agent, or an IRS officer shows up at your home, this means that you have ignored multiple letters that were sent out to you. So they don't just pop up out of nowhere. They have tried to contact you, via snail mail, and you've just totally ignored them. And under those circumstances, they likely will, or they may come knocking on your door trying to find you. And the final way that an IRS officer or agent will try to contact you is by a visit from a criminal investigations division agent. That's something that you absolutely don't want to see coming. This is the worst way you can be contacted by the IRS, because it means that your unfiled returns are subject to criminal investigation. Now, this type of visit usually only occurs if the IRS suspects that you have failed to report hundreds of thousands of dollars over multiple years. Okay, so the big takeaways of this episode are: all individuals are required to file a tax return except if you don't meet the income requirements. Okay. Number 2, all businesses are required to file a return even if you had zero income for the year, in which case you will file a tax return showing zero income. Number 3, the IRS only cares about returns that haven't been filed within the last 6 years. Number 4, if you don't file a return, the IRS may file an SFR on your behalf, which will likely show more tax than you actually owe. Number 5, it's a crime not to file a return, but it isn't a crime to owe taxes that you aren't able to pay. And finally, we talked about the 4 ways in which the IRS usually notifies non-filers. I hope you got some value out of this minicast, and please feel free to contact me at Desiree@AndersonAccounting3.com if you need help with any IRS or state tax issue, or if you need to file past or current tax returns. Desiree is spelled Desarie at AndersonAccounting3.com. See you on my next minicast.